Do you really think there are hundreds of highly paid, highly technical software engineers out there that want to write blog posts for you for $100? Come on. Hey guys, Carl Hughes here with Draft.dev to talk about hiring technical writers for your blog. Okay, so a little bit of context here. I started Draft.dev 4 years ago, and back in the early days, I wrote everything myself. Like most small business owners, I was a DIY, roll up your sleeves and do everything kind of guy. So before starting Draft.dev, I was a software engineer, and for the 10, 12 years of my career where I wrote code, I would occasionally write blog posts. And so it made sense that companies would sometimes reach out to me and ask, hey, would you be interested in writing a blog post for us? Here's the information about our product. And I said no to the broad majority of those requests because they're just not that interesting and it wasn't worth my time. But every now and then I'd get one that I actually liked and I'd say, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so basically when I started Draft.dev, I took that exact same model, what was working for companies reaching out to me, and applied it back. So to kind of give you a little bit of context for Draft, we currently work with over 300 writers, and we do, well, in the last 4 years, we've done over 3,800 blog posts. So it's over 1,000 blog posts a year at this point. And with Draft.dev, our clients are looking for high volume and highly consistent, high quality technical content. And so we need software engineers to write for us who have a wide variety of skills. And one of the challenges there is that you can't just find 5 good software engineers and cover all the skills that would be required from our clients. Our clients are as diverse as DevOps and back-end tooling up to front end, and now a lot of AI and blockchain and things like that. And so it's just too diverse a skill set of technologies that we have to cover to do it with a small writer pool. So we've gotten really good at recruiting and bringing on technical writers for hire. So that's what I'm going to talk about today in this video. I'm going to share with you our process that we use to bring on technical writers for hire and give you a few tips and things that we've learned along the way. Let's get into it. First, before I start, let me give you some of the things that didn't work for me when I was starting Draft.dev. The first one is Upwork. Look, Upwork is fine for a lot of freelance roles. I use that and Fiverr all the time to find people to do little fractional tasks or data entry or maybe design work, stuff that is kind of low skill and relatively straightforward to do. Those kind of platforms are fine. And even non-technical writing, it can be okay to find writers on Upwork, but it just doesn't work for technical writers when you're looking for someone who can actually speak with any level of authority to software engineers. There's just not enough of them on there. Another thing that a lot of our clients will try is bring their own engineers in to write blog posts for the blog. Now, this works when you can do it. The challenge is those engineers have a regular job that they're doing at your company. So the reality is they're not highly motivated to write blog posts for the marketing team. It's not really what they're answering to their boss for doing every day. So if you think about that engineer, they're going to have to say in their stand-up the next day in front of their boss and all their peers, yesterday I spent 8 hours writing a blog post for the marketing team. And it's like, okay, cool. If the team and the managers are all on board to do this, then great. That's a checkbox. It's the thing they did. But it's really not their primary job. And it's not the highest leverage thing they can do with their time. So as we started to scale Draft.dev, we had to find better ways to find software engineers to write blog posts. And this is how we did it. The first thing I would do is sit down with a client and figure out what it is we're trying to write. I think a lot of clients came into it thinking, well, the software engineers who are going to write for us should come up with the ideas for us so they can tell us what software engineers want to know about. It's not very strategic, and it's not really a good way to do marketing. Marketing needs to be driven by a sort of central message from the company. And so I'll sit down now with the clients and talk about what that message is, what the product is, what we're really trying to get across to people, and how we're going to build trust with that population. So once you know the topics you're actually looking for writers for, then you can start to whittle down the kinds of writers you want to find and start to figure out who would be the best to write each of these. Some topics are probably best written internally because they're just too close to your vest, but others are great to send out to freelancers. So now we've got to go find them. The next step is we'd search Dev.to, Medium, Hashnote, all the other big developer blogs and open platforms that are out there to look for people writing on those topics. Some of these platforms have open APIs or search functions that allow you to look for writers or look for individual articles. Others, you have to go a little bit more sideways and figure out ways to search for that stuff through Google. But either way, it's not that hard to go through and find writers who have written on certain topics before. Now, that said, there's sometimes niche topics where it can be super hard to find anybody, or maybe you only find 2 or 3 people who are writing about it. That's okay, and that maybe will get you a starting point. But typically what I'll do is I'll try to go look for tangentially related topics. So let's say you're looking for Scala writers. Scala is a pretty niche technology. Maybe you don't find a ton of people. But there's a lot of people who do Java that would know Scala or bump up against it occasionally. And so I might broaden my search to look for Java developers who have maybe worked in similar platforms and are used to the same kinds of functions that Scala provides. Once you've built your list of people and authors out there who are already writing on the topics, next thing is to find their contact information. Now, this can be tricky, and there are tools out there. I don't necessarily recommend all of them because some of them are a bit invasive, but there's things like Clearbit, People Data Labs, and other tools that let you look for people's email addresses based on their name or their social media platforms. The other way to do it is to connect with them on places like LinkedIn or follow them on Twitter and see if you can send them a direct message. It's a bit of a grind to do this. And honestly, it's one of the most challenging parts of the process sometimes because engineers don't always want to be contacted, but sometimes you'll find people with public information as well. Next, you've got to reach out to each of these people individually. I am a super big fan of custom outreach. I'm super not a big fan of that blanket spray and pray shit that people do that just really makes me feel like they didn't even pay attention to what they were doing or who I am as a person, right? So honestly, the more you can customize these messages, the better response rate you're going to get and the more trust you're going to build with that future writer who's going to work with you. I included in the blog post below a sample of one of the emails I would send off to engineers pretty often. And each one of these I'd send individually through whatever channel I could find them. And I'd respond in a timely manner if they got back to me. Next, you want to understand what actually motivates your technical writers. There aren't that many software engineers out there that are jazzed to write blog posts for $100 each. So at some level, you've got to decide what's the right amount to pay them. Is it $100? Is it $500? Is it $1,000? And then the other hand, you've got to decide, is that really what you want in the writers that work for you? Some people are just motivated because they like the product. And honestly, a lot of the brands that I would say yes to when they asked me to write a blog post, it was more about I wanted to be associated with that brand because I liked what they were doing. I liked what they were building, than it was how much they paid me. DigitalOcean, for example, had a great contributor program several years ago, and they only paid $300 an article. So it's not a great pay rate, honestly, but it was one of the better, more well-known brands in the space. And so getting your name associated with them actually meant something. If you're a tiny startup and you don't have any brand cachet, you might just have to pay more or find writers that are a little more desperate or earlier on just trying to get their name out there in some way. A big part of the motivating factor is being able to give credit to the author. So one of the things we're really fanatical about at Draft.dev, we do hardly any ghostwriting. And when we do it, it's with the author's consent and understanding. But if you're going to have a writer who's technical and deeply skilled, you want to make sure and associate their name to the piece, not just for the writer, but also for your own benefit. Because readers are going to look at that person and look and see, are they really qualified? Is this some marketing BS or is this an actual software engineer that knows what they're talking about? Finally, if you're building out a technical writing program for the long term, you got to find a way to build inbound interest. Now, there's some good lists out there you can share your technical writing program with, and those will get you some inbound interest. But you also want to focus on things like referrals, building up a brand, even writing about the fact you have this program, or putting it out there on LinkedIn, Twitter, Dev.to, etc. There's lots of good ways to promote stuff, but ultimately you want to move from an all outbound to a mix of outbound and inbound interest. The last topic I want to cover here today is paying freelance technical writers. Okay, so honestly, when you start to look for engineers to write blog posts for you, you're almost certainly going to have to pay people in other countries. The US is one of the hardest markets to recruit people for, and it's typically going to be the most expensive place as well. There's lots of legal challenges with it. And so honestly, you'll probably find the bulk of your writers are going to be in other countries, Nigeria, India, possibly places in South America or Eastern Europe even. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but you do have to think about that when you're going to start paying them, because most companies, when they set up a contractor, are planning on US-based W-9 contractors. And that's not going to be the case if you're hiring somebody internationally. So if you aren't familiar, there's something called a W-8, which you're supposed to collect from each of your international contractors. And there's certain platforms that just don't let you pay certain countries, which is really annoying. When I started Draft.dev, I started off using PayPal to pay writers. Well, that worked great for a while until I had to pay somebody in Nigeria and realized that PayPal just doesn't work there. So I had to go out and find another option. And the next thing I tried was wire transfers. Okay, wire transfers work okay, but they charge you every single time you wire the money. And they're a huge pain in the ass to get set up. You have to enter in all their account information just right. And if you do it wrong, the whole thing gets rejected and returned. There's no support at all with a wire transfer. So if you do anything wrong, the money gets lost, good luck. The way we do it today, and the way I usually recommend to anybody who's asking about this, is to use a service called Plane.com. And Plane is fantastic for paying international contractors as well as US-based contractors. Basically, they'll do everything from onboarding that contractor and collecting the documentation, getting their bank details, all in the platform. They'll also have a local compliant contract for them to sign, which means I don't have to go to my lawyers every single time I bring on a writer from a new country and figure out what are the local rules about freelancing. They've already done that legwork. Plane will also collect the W-8s and do all the W-9 and 1099 preparation at the end of the year for you in the US. So it's a great way to save yourself a ton of time. The only downside to Plane for employers is that you're going to pay a monthly fee for every contractor you pay. Now, for us at Draft.dev, we have a large writer pool, but a smaller pool that writes every single month. So while we might have 300 writers in the pool, probably only pay 50 to 200 every month, depending on the month and depending on who all's been active. And so that helps us keep our costs down. Now, at the end of the day, the platform you choose is going to be a function of how many writers you have, how much of a pain it is to make the payments. Because if you only have 2 or 3, wire transfers, PayPal, ACH, it can probably all work. But once you start to get more in the 5, 10 range, I think you're going to want to look for a platform that can actually handle that sort of volume without as much of a pain from your side. All right, so I hope I didn't scare you off from going off to hire your own technical writers. It's a really fun and rewarding way to get your community involved with your developer marketing efforts, but it is a fair bit of work because not only do you have to find the writers, I think a lot of people don't realize how much work they're going to spend editing and in the prep work to get that article live. So even though we work with 300 writers that are all software engineers, very few of them need no editing after they submit their first draft. I would bet that we spend about as much money and time on our editing as we do our writing, because we don't only do an edit, we do copy edits, developmental edits, a technical edit, and there's often back and forth with the client. And so at the end of the day, plan for all that as well in your process and your cost structure. If you pay your engineering writers $500 to $1,000 and you can't afford to pay anybody else on top of that to actually refine the article and get it published, you're not going to actually get content out, and that doesn't actually drive business value. So remember to include the costs of editing and technical review and back and forth and revisions in every article you produce. If you want to know more about what we do at Draft.dev, or you're curious about how we recruit writers, or you want to ask for some feedback on how you've been doing it, feel free to drop us a comment or book a call, draft.dev/call. Look forward to hearing from you soon.